That's awesome.
It was really funny. And I totally understood. I didn't know what it was first time I saw him under an ambient light. It looked so different.
Gives you different perspective on what their coloration means in that environment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Yonaga, that tail, that black tips of their tails is really distinctive. And so that's probably, they can school and they can follow themselves like birds, you know, or other types of fish in schools. Guys don't mind a slight demasking here while I drink some more coffee this morning.
So we're diving on the same seamount next time.
Nope.
A different one.
Different one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, speaking of, so we're not going to ROV4, which was over that kind of smaller bump. We're going over here to Don Quixote.
Let's see, where are you pointing? No, we're not going to go to Don Quixote. We're going to go to that little unmapped bump right above ROV4.
Up here?
Yeah, so we're going to map
okay.
that and then see if we can pick a spot. And the reason being is that one southerly swath that catches the edge of it, I can already tell that that's at a better, more optimal depth. It's a bit shallower than our current site. So ROV4 is a backup site, so in case we don't find anything, we've got one in the bag already.
Okay.
All right, we're halfway to the surface.
You can see the water temperature has increased, almost doubled from where we were.
Which means it's what?
Which means it's warmer.
Yeah, but what's the water temperature now?
3.5 C.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. We could
We're
take
at 1.9.
If we were down there, we could take our wetsuits off.
Oh, yeah. Still
know.
a little chilly for me.
So in the next dive, are we expecting to see different organisms than the ones we've seen in the past 3 dives, or about the same?
You never know.
Never know. Okay.
At this community, I've seen all of these animals, but what differs down there is the assortment of animals you see from seamount to seamount. So you get a different complement, if you will. So on this seamount, you get this type of bamboo and this type of chrysogorgia and this type of thing, and then you go to the next seamount and you see other types of bamboos and this type of thing, this type of thing. So they all, like, every time you go to another seamount, they all go into a jar. Somebody shakes the jar like this and rolls it out onto the table, and you get a whole different set. But it's the same group in a way.
Okay.
A lot of them.
And that's depending on which abiotic factors.
Well, one of the factors is who gets there first and who gets established. Because a lot of times they're being transported to the seamounts and they're settling out as larvae. And in some cases, some species, based on their current distribution, make it to this seamount, and then other species don't. It's all kind of a mystery, and that's why we're trying to resolve all of this, trying to understand why these communities are different, and why each one is often quite unique, even though we know many of the same members, but we never know what the complement is for any seamount, like which ones exactly are going to make up the community on this seamount, and which ones are going to make up the community on that seamount. And then sprinkled in amongst this are always some really unique species that we very rarely see or have never seen as well.
And is it safe to say that all of that begins with the type of rock formation?
That's a good question. Yes, to a certain extent, it's depth and it's the type of rock. if we were to go onto the top of the seamount that we're on right now, which is an old flat top Cretaceous geo, there's going to be a lot more sediment, not tons from the sub-bottom profile data that we know already, but there's going to be more sediment. And we're probably going to get more fish, and we're probably going to get some other types of animals that it's going to be at a shallower depth.
Oh, okay. And is there some kind of material considered mud? Is there mud at the ocean floor?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Is it a lot of it, or?
Oh, yeah. Down in the abyssal depths, it can be really thick and very fine mud. And even on the tops of some of these flat top seamounts, you can have like 100 meters of mud on the top of the actual, before you get to the rock on there. And then some other geodes are rocky right at the top of them. We don't quite understand that either.
I don't know if I recognized any mud on the ocean floor.
No,
because it was so many rocks, and some portions were sandy. It looked like sand. Yeah,
we try to avoid the muddy substrate because corals generally don't like them, and neither do sponges, or there's a very restricted number of corals and sponges that can live in soft substrates. And we're particularly interested in deep sea coral and sponge communities. That's why we purposely choose rockier types of sites. But a lot of the abyssal fish guys, they don't want to be where we are. They're going to go straight for that mud and that soft stuff because that's where they see a lot more fish.
Well, I have to be honest. I never thought of sponges in the deep ocean.
You didn't?
So this is
I
really
can't believe that.
Eye-opening, especially those huge, massive sponges. That's just, I'm just in awe.
Yeah, well, I'll show you some video if we get a chance on this cruise I brought along with me. It was from one of the Okeanos, the Ocean Exploration and Research Institutes, one of their dives. And they do these highlight videos. And the name of this one was called Forest of the Weird.
Oh, wow, that sounds very cool.
Yeah, and it was one of the more amazing places that I've been to. And we were all kind of talking about how this looked like a different planet and so forth. It's just, yeah, it's unreal. The very first time I saw those kind of bolosoma sponges, the ones on the stalk with the sort of the ball on the top of them, I came across a field of those, and this was up here in the monument, actually, up on one of the Hawaiian seamounts. And all I could think of is, what planet am I on? This is nuts, because I'd never seen this before. I've seen some sci-fi movies where they had things like that, but all you have is these sort of giant lollipops all over the landscape. Like, what?
Almost like space or something.
Yeah, it's like space. Oh, what do we got there? It looks like a what? Is that a salp? What is Argus looking at?
Some kind of white fiber?
I think it's a salp, frankly. For those colonial salps, or a siphonophore or something like that. I don't know them very well. So, I was at a conference a number of years ago, and actually Dr. Ballard was at this conference too. It was sort of a deepwater symposium, sort of workshop type of thing. And believe it or not, one of the keynote speakers was an outer space person. And why they invited her to speak at this conference is because NASA is very, very interested in the deep sea, because there's speculation that a lot of planets are actually water planets, and there's a frozen layer over the water. So we see it as more of a solid. For example, some of our moons in our own solar system, such as Titan and Ganymede, and some of these, they're completely frozen, but they believe like several miles down below the ice, there could be liquid water down there, and they suspect that when we find life on another planet, it's probably going to be aquatic first time we find it, not sort of little green men with antennae.
Yeah.
We might see little green aquatic creatures with antennae instead.
Yeah.
But they are sort of following and paying attention, and they think it's a potential preview of what to expect when they actually develop the technology to somehow drill down and explore some of these frozen oceans.
It might just be sponges and corals too.
No, who knows what they would find. But the idea is that space is really cold, of course. That ice acts as sort of a insulation, and then the heat from the core of these moons or these planets can actually warm, you know, up so that you're actually going to liquefy a layer underneath this frozen surface. And life could potentially evolve in that type of an environment.
Deep sea creatures considered more like ancient,
Yeah,
like
that's
sponges and stuff? Are they more? Yeah.
That's a really good question. You know, some of the dogma is that the deep sea is a repository for living fossils, because a lot of strange creatures that have shown up in the fossil records we can see in the deep sea. It's almost been a refuge with all of the changes that are going closer to the surface over millions of years. Then the only place that's been stable enough for animals to and species to actually persist over all these years, millions of years, is the deep sea, which is a more stable environment. So for example, the stock crinoids, which are one of my favorite, they look, I have some crinoid fossils at home. They look virtually the same as the living ones, and they're hundreds of millions of years old. But you don't see them in the shallow anymore, really. You see them in the deep sea.
Yeah.
Do you remember the story of the coelacanth, that really weird fish that was discovered off of Madagascar? And I read the book because I was so fascinated. They had a little pocketbook about it.
Yeah.
But this guy, who I guess he was a paleontologist, he was on Madagascar for whatever reason, and he saw some fishermen bringing some fish to market on a cart or something, and lo and behold, he looked at this fish and he's going, this cannot be. This is a fish that I see in my rocks. Like that. And so he actually tracked it down and discovered that this was real, and they're big. And it turned out that it was an actual living fossil, a very, very ancient type of fish. That's one of the very early fishes in the whole lineage of the group. And it's called a coelacanth. And I don't think they've, off of Madagascar, I'm not sure whether or not they've actually seen them in situ, but then they found that there was another species of these fish off of Indonesia. And some people did dive on that and actually got video of them there. They live at about 200 meters down, and they got video of this fish in its actual natural environment.
Wow.
And it's totally bizarre because it's one of those fish that they believe is part of the lineage of when animals, vertebrates, started emerging onto land, because its fins aren't your typical just frilly fins. It actually has limbs, and on the ends of the limbs are the fins. So
that's so interesting.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if a lot of these sponges too are essentially unchanged, and we know that from the spicules on them, that they're unchanged for millions of years. So.
How big
Oh.
are the cutters?
Oh, you're looking at the forest of the weird. Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't wait.
Okay. Are you gonna play it?
Oh, right now?
Well,
Can I?
or you can wait. Yeah, you
Yeah,
can
I'll
wait.
wait.
Yeah.
But how big are the coral cutters?
You got to ask the front row about that. How big are the coral cutters? The manipulator that has it?
Uh-huh. Yeah, Trevor.
Hello.
How big are the cutters in the
Well, we can ask
manipulator?
Antonella to put them into the lasers, which I will turn on right now.
Oh, okay.
Be
And you
nice
can
to her too. She's
measure
got a
yourself.
knife in her hand.
Yeah.
There you go. There's the lasers, 10 centimeters apart. So you can say, are you able to get them more parallel to the,
Okay.
get them more lined up for you there. Stand by.
And that knife, what would you use it for?
Nice.
Stabbing.
Yeah, unruly science communicators. Yeah. And
There you
science
go.
leads. I think they've used it more on science leads than communicators.
All right, Antonella's ready to cut some bread.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, about 20 centimeters approximately.
Are there any instances where you use 2 manipulators?
Yes, absolutely. On earlier cruise this season, Ocean Networks Canada, we'd use the port manipulator. It's not quite as deft as the starboard one, so it's not quite as useful, but it's very strong. So we often used it to grab scientific instruments subsea if we want to connect or disconnect cables from them.
Oh.
So you need something to pry against. It's hard to pry against nothingness. So you grab one side of it with the left arm and the other side of it with the right arm. Cool. Now what?
I got a question for you, front row.
Sure.
And this is something that we thought about a lot with the submersible because we were in the vehicle. But
Yeah.
how would you respond if you wound up in an entanglement hazard, such as a lost anchor line or some discarded cable or something? What
Good
would
question.
you do?
Well, there's a reason we have multiple knives on board, is mainly for those situations. In the same way scuba divers try to always dive with dive knives, ROV always goes down with at least one, if not 2 or 3 knives to cut through discarded fishing gear or whatever. Yeah, so first is obviously prevention. Do not get tangled. And failing that, cut yourself free. Failing that, pull up really hard on the winch.
And hopefully it'll part the line.
Yeah.
Some of that polypro, that floating polypro, is really hard to break.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So avoidance perhaps is the #1 strategy.
Avoidance is a great strategy. Spatial awareness and watching for any kind of linear features
Yeah.
is really important.
We heard your comment when we first saw that sponge stock down there, where the first thing you think of is that a line.
Yeah. Nature doesn't often make perfectly straight lines. So, see a perfectly straight line? Gotta panic a little bit.
So do you want to hear another story?
Yeah, let's hear another story.
Okay, well, I was fortunate enough to be in one of the 2 submersibles when the Japanese midget sub was discovered off of Honolulu in Pearl Harbor. It was a test dive, and we were looking for it because we did mapping and we're looking at targets and trying to find things. But anyway, because it was a test dive, one of the exercises we always did was what happens if the submersible were to get entangled. And on dives that we suspect it could get entangled, we have a wire cutter, you know, as hydraulic cutters. And anyway, so the exercise involves one of the two subs going up to the other sub, and we'd stretch the line across the front of the other sub, and you go up with the cutters and you cut the other sub free, which is one of the advantages of having two submersibles down there.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd gone through all of these exercises, and we also have these exercises where one sub goes and hides, and the other sub has to locate the other sub just from this emergency pinger that's on it. And so you zero in, the pilot has got a headset on, and he's listening to these pings and sort of locating where it is, and eventually hones in on it.
Uh-huh.
So we got through all of these exercises, and then we were going to head over to where we thought maybe the midget sub was, the target. And on the way over, and I was in the second sub, and our chief pilot was in the first sub, we were hearing some chatter on the sub phone, and then we saw this enormous cloud of sediment over where it was. And as we got closer, we realized that they had inadvertently got entangled in one of those huge barge hawsers.
Oh my gosh.
A metal cable, and there's no way the cutters were going to get them free.
Yeah.
And because it was kind of on the side of the sub, Terry couldn't see what the issue was, and so he asked us to go over and take a look.
Uh-huh.
And we went over there. He stopped thrusting, because at first he was trying to thrust, and that's what was kicking up all the sediments. We stopped thrusting so we could take a look. And one of these loops in these big discarded gigantic cables had looped over the knuckle of the manipulator.
Oh, wow.
Over there, and he didn't know that. Of course, he didn't know where he was hung up. And the problem was we call these things cable monsters down there because they used to just discard this huge mass of cable down off of Pearl Harbor that are just treacherous. And I think the current blew him into this one, and he hadn't really seen it, you know. Anyway, we got there and looked at it, and there's no way we could go down there and try to pull this cable off, because in order to do so, we would have been right in the middle of this cable monster.
Yeah.
And so, but what we could do is we could tell him precisely what the situation was with his manipulator. We described the loop and how it had caught the knuckle of the manipulator, and on that basis, he was able to operate the manipulator and slip out of the loop.
Oh, wow.
But it was just so bizarre because we had just done the drill about entanglements, and it's a one and only time I've ever seen one of those submersibles entangled. And then we went on after that, everything was fine, and within another hour we were sitting next to the midget sub.
It's incredible.
Right next to it, and we documented it, and everyone was going freaking crazy because it's such an enormously historic wreck.
Uh-huh.
And as we came back into port on the ship, they were playing the local TV in the galley of the ship, and we could see there's this huge crowd at the dock, and we were on TV, live TV, as we're coming into the port.
Teresa and Andy, I'm sorry. A couple of viewers are wondering why we're coming up sooner than expected.
Yeah, Chris.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons is that we have a start point and we have an end point to every dive that we want to accomplish, and we actually reached our end point earlier than expected. That's one of the reasons. And also, the area that we've been surveying, we already know has got a spectacular coral and sponge garden along this wall and everything else, and that was one of the things we achieved that objective. We've got all of the rocks that we needed from the site, and we have also Dr. Orcutt's rocks as well, and we don't really have any space to collect anything more, so it's as though we finished all of our objectives. And then finally, the community was tapering out. The end point, instead of going beyond it, the end point was getting into a little more flatter terrain that was less attractive for the corals. So that was part of it. And the other part of it is we have a very close watch on a storm system that's expected to come through this area on Wednesday. And we're trying to accomplish a certain number of these northern dives before we actually have to move south and get out of the storm system and do more work south. And this actually bought us 4 extra hours to spend up here before we have to leave because of the storm. So it seemed to make a lot of sense to go ahead and cut the dive short at that point. So that's the reason.
Yeah, well, many reasons.
Yeah, many reasons. And that's what you do out on this cruise. It isn't just usually one reason. You think of a variety of reasons to do anything that makes sense. And that was it. There was, so.
Thank you. Thank you for a very detailed explanation.
Yeah, sorry for our viewers who are expecting another 4 hours of viewing, but we will also be turning everything around as quickly as possible, and we'll be putting this vehicle down in the water as quickly as possible, hopefully by noon today, to do our next dive.
Yeah,
so
thank you. And the viewer who asked about the mud or clay at the bottom of the ocean stepped away, so this viewer is also asking like what type of mud, what that mud is composed of, if you can answer that question. Or it might be a more geological type of question.
Well, it's kind of half-half because a lot of that mud is made of the shells or skeletons of diatoms and microorganisms as well, so it can be diatomaceous, I think. And then just some general sediment that's in the water column that settles out onto the seafloor, and fine particles, and it's kind of made up of a lot of things.
Is there a pattern that causes mud areas?
Now you're getting to a point where I gotta bail on that one. I don't know that.
Okay.
But you know, the most obvious answer is because there isn't as much current, possibly across the abyssal plains in very deep water, and that allows these sediments to settle and accumulate to a significant depth. There's still current down there, but compared to like these ridges that we're diving on where you get acceleration that are pretty much swept of a lot of sediment, when you get down deep, it's just very gradual and quiet, and then things can build up. A lot of mud can just build up there over time.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if Dr. Balvas would give us, she would know more, right?
She absolutely would know more.
And her watch is from 12 to 4?
Yes, because she's right before us. So the viewer who asked that question, if you can try to make that other watch and pose that question, Dr. Balvas can give a much better answer, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Got any more questions? Because I don't know if anyone wants to hear any more of my stories, so let's see if we can get some more questions. I'm just filling the time.
Yeah. Well, there's another question here for the ROV pilots. Can the manipulators be pre-programmed to do an intricate maneuver?
They can, but the maneuvers are often different enough that we don't. So the starboard manipulator is also used in nuclear power plants to handle radioactive material, and they will program the manipulators in that context, because they do the same motion over and over again. But we rarely do the same motion over and over again, precisely enough that we can pre-program them.
And have our ROVs been tangled before?
I don't know if these ones have. I've definitely driven other ROVs, flown other ROVs right under fishing gear and had to untangle them.
We had some fishing gear last year in Monterey, or it was West Coast. Yeah, we got tangled up. It was very dramatic.
Wow.
Yeah, one of our viewers said Hercules was tangled a couple of seasons ago, but it was able to cut itself out. So.
Entanglements are probably the thing that gives the pilots and everybody on the front row the most nightmares, because they're perhaps one of the biggest hazards out there.
So what would seem to be an obvious question, which do you prefer, Chris, the going down physically in the sub itself, or this kind of exploration?
Frankly, I like them both. I started out my deep sea career going down
Yep, that.
personally. And that's quite an experience, in part because when you're down there, you know where you are, and it's like, my goodness, I am down here at 1,500 meters. I can't believe it. But you're looking out a really small window, and the cameras are a little bit different. They don't have quite the setup here, and it's a very different experience. I do a bit more because I work for the organization. I would help out a lot more operating cameras and changing CO2 scrubbers and things like that in the back of the sub, which was kind of fun to do. I even got to drive the sub once.
Nice.
You know, for a very short distance.
You didn't crash into anything?
No, the pilot made sure he picked the spot where I couldn't get into trouble. Thank goodness, because it's pretty tricky. But that was wild. But then on these ROVs, the imagery is extraordinary. You just can't get the same kind of imagery.
Yeah.
And so even though you're down there and you're actually right up against the polyp as well, you just can't see what you can see with these cameras, where they can actually see the sclerites inside the polyp stalks and things. And the quality of the video, the effort they take to do the color balancing and everything, it's extraordinary. And then this telepresence, you can't do that by submersible, right?
No, you can't.
That is such an incredible tool, you know, and we never really knew that in the submersible, and you don't realize how important that is until you get here, because you can get people to participate from all corners of the world simultaneously, whereas in your submersible, you got the pilot and your observers, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then you come back up, you do the best you can, and then you don't get help from everybody else. You have to help yourself on IDs and all this other stuff.
Yeah, that's quite a bit of difference there.
Yeah, so it's just different. The submersibles I think are quite good for visual observation, fisheries service. Like it has its own niche.
Yeah.
That it's very, very good.
The ones that you were down on, they just had the ports as opposed to the big glass dome, right?
That's correct. But
Yeah.
I think there are probably some people on this boat who've been in one of those the submersibles by Harbor Branch that had the big domes, which must have been an extraordinary experience.
Yeah.
You're seeing in all different directions.
That's really neat.
But of course you can't go as deep, at least with those subs, because of the fragility of a dome versus the shells here and so forth. I don't know, different experiences, but they're both just wonderful. Just to be in the deep sea, either in person or the ROV, is just, that's the life I want.
Yeah. But you don't need to want it, you have it.
Yes, exactly.
You've been doing this for a long time. How many years?
My first submersible dive was 1997.
Ah.
And we wound up on this extremely boring sediment flat because we didn't have good mapping data back then either.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter. I was just so thrilled.
I bet. Sure, just
We're seeing flounders and flatfish and
Uh-huh.
little crabs, and it didn't matter. The pageantry is the same. When you're lifting over these multi-ton vehicles off the back deck of a ship, there's just something magical about it. You can just, it's just amazing. You know, the whole thing, it's very similar, cranes, A-frames off the back, so forth.
Those weren't connected to the ship, right? They were free.
Yeah, they were
moving.
free. They had a somewhat similar technology. There's forward-looking sonars in the sub too, and we would use those frequently to locate wrecks and targets and things like that. But of course, you have to maintain a living environment in a sub, so you have oxygen sensors in the shell, and you have to pay attention to those.
Yeah.
And CO2 sensors.
You can't drink any coffee, of course.
No. Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to go into the details, but there are ways in which you can get around those issues.
Yeah. That's what the kids always want to know. How do you go to the bathroom?
Well, there was one young woman who was going to do her very first submersible dive, and she was terrified that she would have to go to the bathroom during the dive. And so I gave her some tips to avoid that. And she came up out of the sub, and she crawls out of the sub, and she goes running over to me, and she gives me this bear hug. And she said, "It worked. I didn't have to. It worked."
Nice. Yeah, that would be brutal. So hold it for too long.
I still remember her name, Korikane. I think she's still in Hawaii too, but I may be mistaken. Delightful student who was out with us.
Yeah, she's done some work with us too. I think she's in Washington right now.
But she's in Washington. Okay.
Yeah. We're seeing a little bit of there's salps, right?
Yeah, there's something there in the distance.
So another one drift past the camera.
Come on, Aphrodite. There's got to be some more questions.
Okay. Well, here, let's see. Here's a comment. I haven't read it yet. I absolutely love watching the live dives. In the last few days, we have seen, in addition to the beautiful corals and the monster sponge, a headless chicken monster, Venus flytrap anemone, tusk eels, polyp-eating jellyfish, and a crab wears something anemone-like as a hat. Oh, what was that called?
That was a Parapagurus species, the name, with those weird cnidarians that stuck out like radii coming out of the top of it.
I would call it a very scholastic shrimp or crab.
Scholastic shrimp.
Scholastic crab.
Oh, why?
Because it has its little backpack with it.
Well, it could have been an adventurous crab that was off on a hike.
Yeah. That was, I think for me, it was like the coolest things that I saw.
But when did the polyp-eating jellyfish, I know what that animal is. It wasn't on our watch. I was hoping to see one of those. And so.
Yeah, well, this is a very concise and exciting summary of our dive by this viewer. So thank you for that. Yeah. Oh, here's another question. Are there any places or companies that offer lay people to go down into the deep sea, or just for scientists?
So the if I'm not mistaken, the Russian Mir subs were at one point in time were offering some trips down to the Titanic by people, but they're extremely expensive. So unfortunately, it isn't for most of us, because obviously it's a very expensive operation. You know, probably the best thing where the most people can participate is exactly what we're doing right now by broadcasting the live video via remote vehicles so that everybody can see what we see at the same time. So, I remember there are some outfits. I understand that there was a place down in the Caribbean at a resort where they had a small submersible where they were taking some of their guests down to about 500 feet. And my mother actually went down.
Oh.
She was down there on a vacation and went down in a submersible down there. So there's a few of them around, I think.
So this viewer says that the polyp-eating jellyfish was around 2054. our time last
I
night.
can't believe it. Like less than an hour after our
Jeez.
watch, we just missed it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Wow,
That's
this
not fair.
viewer is just taking care of all watches, it seems like.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I
great. Well, I'm
wonder
glad
where,
he saw it. He was treated to that because that's so unique to
yeah.
see that.
I wonder where that viewer is,
Uh-huh.
how old he is.
Wonder if
Yeah.
some of these viewers would every once in a while throw out their names so we know who we're talking to, because
Yeah.
we can address them directly.
Mm-hmm. Like Jason, I think it's
Yeah, Jason has.
he has commented this morning,
Uh-huh.
so I know where he's following us. There were some questions about the cameras on Hercules and Argus. So, Trevor Antonella, can you
Hello.
tell us a little more about the cameras? Like the type of camera, the number of cameras?
You might know more about that than
Yeah, I
yeah.
do.
Hey, thank you, Antonella.
Yeah, why doesn't Aaron go for it?
So the two main views you're looking at, those are made by Pacific Insight, and we call them Herc Zeus and Argus Zeus. They don't shoot in 4K; they shoot in HD. These are our main cameras. The ROV pilots will be the ones that move them from left to right or up and down, and then the video engineer is the one that zooms in, focuses, and works on the iris. There's also a number of other cameras all over Herc and Argus, as well as a huge number of cameras all over the deck and down in the winch hold. So it gives those are more utility ones that give the ROV pilots different looks at equipment they need or different views of tools they have. And like they were talking about earlier, kind of creates a fuller picture of everything around them. I don't know if that's what they wanted to know, but that's...
Yeah. And I noticed that Argus has a huge camera on the back, and that's the camera that
Huge camera.
the views Hercules, like when Hercules is...
Yeah, so that camera is the same one that's on Herc. So those two main cameras are identical cameras, and each vehicle has one of them. So each ROV has one of those Pacific Insight cameras.
Oh, great.
You see that next message there? It's Veronica. She gave her name, and she's watching from Kauai, Hawaii. So that's terrific.
Yay.
And she's trying to catch all the dives.
Yeah.
Wow.
Kauai
Is she sleeping?
absolutely...
How do you catch all the dives?
Kauai is such a
lot of
beautiful island.
coffee.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much sleep she's getting.
Yeah.
That's very exciting.
Well, Veronica, we're going to try really hard to continue to bring you exciting dives with a lot of things.
Around what time are we expected to start the next one?
Well, it depends upon how long Trevor takes to get that little red polyp out of the tube. Because we don't want an animal in there if we want to use that suction sampler for other things. So that's the one thing he's going to do. But we're going to try to turn this around, and we're shooting for just after noon Hawaii time.
And then how long would it take for the vehicles to descend?
Probably about somewhere between 1 to 2 hours. So maybe we'd be at bottom sometime around 3 o'clock or so in the afternoon, I guess. I'm not really sure.
And how long is this exploration?
This one will probably be shorter, back to the 12-hour, because the seamount's much smaller this time. And the issue is that we're going to potentially dive on a site we haven't mapped yet, but it's small, so we're going to do 2 quick mapping passes over it, and then pick a dive site on the fly and kind of try to go very quickly, get a dive plan out very quickly, and some maps. And that'll be kind of my job, is to really turn that around and produce that dive plan, and so that it can be emailed out to everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Sure. I assume most of the viewers know that what they're doing with the manipulator up here as we're ascending, this is a perfect time to practice and train and do things like that. And you've been watching, they're doing all types of things up there, taking advantage of the time and just being in very safe mid-water.
And if that night drops,
That night,
can it be caught?
And we'll go get it next time we're here.
No. Wow.
that looks like an expensive knife, so they don't want to drop it. Did
Yeah.
you get that at like Safeway or Costco maybe? Or
This is definitely from some kitchen store. Maybe Walmart, I don't know. Not a sponsor.
Very high-end tool.
You know how we used to secure things to the front porch in the submersible? We used rubber bands often. So you never know it's going to work. And they get very stretchy under pressure.
Oh.
So normally you would take a rubber band and you'd open it up by a few inches, and if you keep pulling, it's going to break. But down under pressure, that rubber, for whatever reason, because the air is compressed, it just goes. So they actually got to pull it quite a bit further to break the rubber bands to get the tool they want.
Wow.
Some of the more interesting things you've seen on descent, this one coming up.
Oh boy, you're gonna make me try to remember another story, aren't you?
Yeah.
Ascent. You mean from ROV or submersible, or which? The
Submersible.
submersible? Oftentimes I'm looking at the ceiling of the sphere in the submersible while I'm writing my report and taking advantage of the time. And I'm lying on my back.
Oh, I see.
I can tell you it's not really the ascent.
That was good. That looks healthy.
So one of these kind of unique dives we did, it was a 2-sub dive, it was a test dive, and we don't often go down slope, but we did in this particular case. And so he had the lead sub, and the following sub had to keep the lead sub in view. But we would often be up above the lead sub, further up kind of in the water column, and they were closer to the bottom. And you can't really see the lead sub with all your lights on, so what we would do is we would turn our lights off. And so you can very clearly see the lead sub down there, so the pilot can keep an exact distance. But with all the lights off, then you are astonished by how much of phosphorescent plankton is in the water, because every time anything would sort of touch parts of the manipulator or something, it would light up. And I would be absolutely mesmerized. I'd be looking out the window, not just looking at the lead sub, but looking at this light show.
Yeah. Cool.
There's a researcher who used to be in Florida with Harbor Branch. Her name is Edie Witter, and she actually is studying all of that type of thing. And she had what she called, I think, a splatter screen, which was designed to actually hit the plankton so it would all light up, and she was recording all these patterns of light that different organisms were emitting.
That's cool.
Yeah. Is that Haunani?
Yeah.
I was about to say, it sure looks like her.
Mm-hmm.
She's about 5 or 6 years older.
It's
That
her.
What is she? She's on some type of
This is his
a
story
sailing
map.
vessel.
They were kind of his story map.
But she's on a sailing vessel, right?
Yeah. That's what they went up there on.
Yeah.
Kaniolu.
Is this your story map?
Yeah.
Oh, this is the one you were going to show me, right?
Seems to be kind of loading better in the van.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I got to look at this. So is it online?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's online.
So you could email me the link then.
Yeah, for sure. I think Emil also emailed it out.
Yeah, he
When
did.
was this?
It was a few days ago.
Yeah, a couple days ago.
Oh, I got to look for that.
I can send it again though.
Yeah, I'm afraid I get a fair amount of that, and some things I miss.
Yeah, there's a
behind.
lot. Yeah, to keep up with.
That's so cool when you drag that back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild.
Gone.
Whoa, look at that. That's cool. So how Nani taught you how to do these, or self-taught, or how did you learn how to do story maps?
Pretty much self-taught.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of resources though. Like I watched a lot of. There's even a webinar. Thankfully, like around the time I was building mine, so I was able to, watch and yeah, I think the GIS community is really good at having a lot of resources to kind of figure things out.
Yeah, exactly. Some of those forums there where if you got a problem, you can pose the question and you can get the solution.
Or like YouTube too has been helpful. But yeah,
I guess that's, you know, we often
keep going.
times of sort of
Keep
note the
scrolling
sort
down.
of negative aspects of the internet and all of these sort of nasty chats. But then we don't often mention how there's so many people out there that are trying to help other people that they don't even know. And
exactly.
How long did this take you to make?
Maybe over a few weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
was this part of a class or assignment, or you just decided you wanted to do this on your own, or?
Yeah, it was just my lab, head of my lab suggested it, and I just tried it out.
This is amazing. Way to go.
Thank you.
And of course, you won the award, the recognition on this too. I got to look at this for sure.
Thank you.
Can we still submit upvotes for your story?
What is that?
Can we still submit upvotes?
Oh yeah, it's open on, I think all the way up until they're gonna announce the top 3 winners on the 10th of December.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, so we have some time.
You have to keep us updated.
Yeah, I will.
Cool.
I tried to vote for it, but I had to log in.
Oh.
Is that?
No, it should be viewable to the public.
I'm gonna try it again.
Your microphone's far away again.
Thank you, Erin.
Mm-hmm.
That's better?
Yep, much better.
Oh boy, I'm trying to gauge when I got to go wake some people up.
Wake some people up?
Beth and Steve weren't expecting to need to be getting specimens this early.
Oh,
because we're only 400 meters to the surface now.
And we have many more specimens.
Yeah, we have a lot of work for them. I might give them another 15 minutes to sleep. And, I have to get somebody, a woman down there, to knock on Andrea and Beth's door, and then I'll go bother Steve himself.
Oh, Andrea and who?
Andrea and Beth are sharing the same stateroom.
Oh,
And
okay.
Andrea, of course, got off at just a little while ago.
Oh.
So
And how about Sarah?
that's true. I'll let them wake up. I'll go wake up Steve.
Sarah is right next to me.
Well, do you want to? Maybe you could go and wake her up too.
Okay.
None of these people know that we're coming up 4 hours early.
Yeah. Should I go right now or?
I was just going to give them, I was going to wait for the last moment. I figure, you know, it'll take them a while to get on deck and get it all ready. And
I saw Steve when I was down there. He's aware.
oh, he is?
Yep.
I wonder who's going to wake up Beth, though. She's going to need to know. And Sarah as well. Well, we'll figure it out. Maybe Steve will get somebody to wake them up. Any more questions or comments?
Yeah, the last one. How do you guys mitigate any corrosion on the ROVs?
All the aluminum is connected to sacrificial anodes, little zinc anodes. So that creates a little chemistry magic that when it's in the water, it corrodes away the zinc before the aluminum. And we change those on our maintenance.
A lot of boats have those too, don't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, aluminum boats, especially.
And by the way, that question was posed by Reese. So thank you very much for your question, Reese.
I like when they add names. That's a cool way to hear who's watching.
Yeah, RHYS.
So Mary from Charleston, South Carolina, is asking whether you've determined the cause by the separation of Herc and Argus on the west coast. Can't hear you.
We don't really ever get to know for sure the cause, but we can say that there was very minimal damage. We were able to look them over and send one thing out for service and clean them up a little bit, connect them again, and we're ready to go and doing this cruise. So there was it was a pretty good result considering how scary it was.
And all the cruises have not been affected by it, right? In terms of timing,
Exactly.
we're
yeah.
right on target.
Right on target. Yeah.
Very efficient team.
Well done, ROV team.
But also, Mary, it should also be mentioned that we were very, very fortunate because the Woods Hole, I guess it was Jason, was nearby and was able to effect the rescue of those vehicles very quickly after they went to the seafloor. Was it it was a Jason, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
So there is a question about the rock that was different than the other ones.
What's the question again?
So let's see. That random rock on the bottom, there's no chance it's like a drop stone from a glacier?
I don't think so because we're in such deep water out here. I don't think there was any type of glacial ice this far out. I mean, when you're talking about 2,500 meters down on the seafloor, I mean, the ice was mostly over the continent itself. It didn't really get this far south in the ocean itself. So I don't think it's from that. But I mean, I saw the pictures, and that's why Emil got very excited about it and is trying to send this around. It just did not belong. It's
yeah, it was clear. It had a pretty definite shape.
Very definite shape that looked man-made, and plus it had no crusting whatsoever. All the other rocks have this manganese crust precipitate covering them. This was absolutely clean.
Very clean.
Pristine. So I don't know. very, very unusual observation. And where particularly Emil is